The silence in the car was a comfort. A thick, velvet blanket wrapped around me, shielding me from the relentless hum of the world outside. It was a silence I'd grown accustomed to, not just in cars, but in my life, in my marriage of 30 years. 30 years. A lifetime, it felt like. A life built meticulously, brick by brick, with my husband, Mark. 2 daughters now grown, their laughter echoing in the hollow chambers of our quiet home. Our life was stable, predictable, like a well-worn path through a familiar forest. No surprises, no sudden detours, just the steady crunch of leaves underfoot. But that day, the path had veered. My old sedan, a faithful companion through countless school runs and grocery hauls, had sputtered its last breath just a mile from the supermarket. A minor inconvenience, I told myself, trying to quell the rising tide of frustration. Mark was at work, immersed in his spreadsheets and meetings. I could call a cab, wait for an eternity, or I could accept the unexpected offer that materialized as if from thin air. Ethan. He appeared at the precise moment my despair was about to bloom into full-blown irritation. A colleague of Mark's, though I'd only met him a handful of times at office picnics. A fleeting handshake, a polite smile. He was younger than Mark, perhaps late 40s, with a quiet confidence that was both unassuming and strangely captivating. He hadn't just offered a ride, he'd insisted, his eyes holding a genuine concern that disarmed my usual reserve. "No trouble at all, Sarah," he'd said, his voice a low, even cadence, as he gestured towards his sleek, dark SUV. "I'm heading that way anyway." I knew he wasn't. His office was in the opposite direction. Yet, I found myself nodding, a small, uncharacteristic surrender to circumstance. The drive began with polite pleasantries, the kind you exchange with an acquaintance. We talked about the weather, the perpetually congested traffic, the rising cost of groceries. My answers were clipped, practiced, designed to keep the conversation at arm's length. I was Sarah, Mark's wife, a mother, a woman who had mastered the art of polite disinterest. I had perfected the invisible shield, the subtle deflection that kept the outside world from peering too closely into the quiet corners of my soul. But Ethan, he had a way of looking at you, not just with his eyes, but with a quiet intensity that seemed to see through the shield. He wasn't overtly charming or flirtatious. There was no theatricality to his attentiveness. It was simply present. He listened, truly listened, to my perfunctory responses about my day, about the kids, about anything and everything that kept the real me hidden. And his attention lingered, just a beat longer than anyone else's. It was unsettling. And, if I was brutally honest, a little thrilling. We hit a red light, the kind that seems to stretch into an eternity, giving you ample time to notice the chipped paint on the car in front, the distant sirens, the gentle hum of the engine. The world outside dissolved, and for a moment it was just the two of us in the insulated cocoon of his car. I was idly tracing the pattern on my jeans, mentally running through my grocery list, when his voice, soft and unexpected, sliced through the comfortable silence. "Sarah," he began, and I braced myself for another polite inquiry about my husband, or a trivial observation about the road. But what followed was a question that stopped my breath in my throat, a question that felt less like a query, and more like a gentle, seismic shift in the carefully constructed landscape of my life. "Do you ever wonder if you're still seen?" The words hung in the air, heavy and resonant, each syllable a perfectly weighted stone dropping into the still waters of my consciousness. My hand, which had been idly tracing patterns on my jeans, froze. My gaze snapped from the mundane fabric to his profile. He wasn't looking at me, but straight ahead, his eyes fixed on the distant red light, as if the answer lay suspended in its crimson glow. Still seen. The question wasn't about physical appearance, not truly. It was about something far deeper, something I hadn't dared to articulate, even to myself, in years. It was about existence, about relevance, about the feeling of being acknowledged not just as a role, a wife, a mother, a dutiful daughter, but as Sarah. Just Sarah, the woman who once harbored dreams of painting vibrant landscapes, who devoured poetry, who believed in a fierce, untamed kind of love. In the steady rhythm of our 30-year marriage, I had become an extension, an accessory. I was Mark's wife, the manager of our home, the organizer of our lives. My individuality, once a vibrant flame, had dwindled to a barely flickering ember, overshadowed by the roles I so readily embraced. Mark loved me. I knew that. But when was the last time he truly looked at me? Not at the dishes, not at the laundry, not at the list of chores, but at me? When had he last seen the woman beneath the layers of responsibility? The woman who still yearned for passion, for recognition, beyond the domestic sphere. My throat tightened. A strange, unfamiliar ache spread through my chest, a mixture of sudden insight and profound loneliness. It was as if Ethan, with that one simple question, had peeled back the curtain on a stage where I had been performing for years, revealing an empty auditorium. He had articulated the silent, gnawing fear that had resided in the deepest corners of my being, that I had become invisible. I managed a choked laugh, a pathetic attempt to deflect the raw truth his words had unearthed. "What do you mean?" My voice was thin, reedy, barely my own. He turned to me then, his gaze gentle but unwavering. Do you ever feel like you're more than just someone's wife or someone's mother? Do you feel like you are still perceived, not just as a function, but as a person, with your own thoughts, your own desires, your own spark? His words weren't accusatory, nor were they pitying. They were simply observant. He wasn't just asking me if I wondered. He was suggesting that he saw that very question reflected in my tired eyes, in the almost imperceptible slump of my shoulders. He saw the woman beneath the veil of domesticity. And that acknowledgement, from a near stranger, was both terrifying and profoundly liberating. The light turned green, and the world outside surged back to life. Cars honked, engines roared, and the spell was broken. But the question, once whispered into the silence, now thrummed in my veins, a persistent melody. The rest of the drive was a blur. I mumbled a thank you when he dropped me off, my mind still reeling. The groceries sat in the trunk, forgotten for a moment, as I stood on the curb, the question echoing in the vast expanse of my sudden self-awareness. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay beside Mark, the familiar rhythm of his breathing a comfort, yet also a stark reminder of the chasm that had quietly grown between us. We had built a life, a good life, but somewhere along the way, I had lost myself in the construction. I had become the scaffolding, not the magnificent building it supported. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror, truly looked. Not at the fine lines around my eyes or the silver strands peeking through my hair. I looked into my own eyes, searching for the spark Ethan had alluded to. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A tiny flicker rekindled by a single, unexpected question. It wasn't about a new romance or a grand escape. It was about reclaiming myself. It was about remembering that I was still here, still vibrant, still worthy of being seen. It was about finding my own light again, so I could shine it. Not just for Mark, not just for my daughters, but for me. It began with small steps. Writing in a journal again, something I hadn't done since my youth. Buying a new paint set. Taking long walks, simply to observe the world, not to accomplish a task. And then, one evening, I sat Mark down. The conversation was difficult, raw, punctuated by long silences. I told him how I felt, how I had slowly, almost imperceptibly, disappeared into the fabric of our shared life. I told him I needed to feel alive again, to feel seen. His initial confusion gave way to a quiet understanding, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of the man I had married, the man who had once looked at me as if I held the secrets of the universe. That moment at the stoplight, that single, unassuming question from Ethan, wasn't a catalyst for betrayal or a dramatic upheaval. It was a mirror held up to my soul, reflecting a truth I had consciously or unconsciously avoided for years. It was a reminder that sometimes the most profound revelations come from the most unexpected places, from the quiet observations of a kind stranger. And it taught me that rediscovering yourself isn't about finding someone new to see you. It's about remembering that you were always there, waiting to be seen, first and foremost, by yourself. What are your thoughts on Sarah's journey of rediscovery? Have you ever had a moment where an unexpected encounter shifted your perspective? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if you resonate with stories of self-discovery and hidden truths, please consider subscribing to Silent Truths for more narratives that explore the quiet, yet profound shifts in our lives.